Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Hope you had a wonderful week and you're ready for some crazy stuff this weekend. So, of course, the news today is the ruling by the Court of Appeal when it comes to the Bell Hotel in Epping. So the government has succeeded in overturning the temporary injunction. So that's going to be a bit of a problem going forward for the likes of Reform UK and the Conservatives. Or maybe not, we'll have to wait and see. So I'm going to cover mainly that tonight, also a potential reshuffle within the cabinet and flags. It seems that Reform UK are willing to take down flags for certain reasons. So we'll jump into our first story, of course, which is about the court ruling. So let's see what this has to say from Sky News.
Let's bring in our correspondent Becky Johnson, who is following this for us. So, Becky, the government has won at this stage. More stages to come.
Yes, and protesters against the asylum seekers being here, who've been taking to the streets for the last few weeks, who were jubilant last week when this interim injunction was granted, meaning the asylum seekers would have to be out by the end of next week. Well, they no doubt will feel angry at this decision by the Court of Appeal. It was quite a lengthy decision, but found...
Can I just ask a question? Why is it whenever something happens in favour of the protesters, they're celebrating? When it goes against them, it's activist judges. It's the Keir Starmer who's convincing people within the judiciary to vote against... the rule of law, or against the people. And this is what's been pushed by the likes of Reform and the Conservatives, that the judges are working against the best interests of the public. So when it goes in their favour, completely mute. When it goes against them, they activate the klaxon of activist judges.
For flaws, essentially, in what the High Court judge had ruled, essentially saying that the residents here in Epping, their fear of crime had properly been taken into account. He said he agrees it's relevant, but clearly outweighed by the undesirability of incentivising protests. Now, essentially what the judge was saying there was that while Epping Council had partly argued that they wanted the asylum seekers out to stop the protests happening here, what this judge was saying was, well, effectively that worked if that interim injunction had gone ahead and the asylum seekers had been moved out, and therefore that would incentivise protests in other parts of the country, as indeed we've already been seeing.
And the judge is correct. If this had gone through, if the appeal had been unsuccessful, as in if the injunction had been made permanent, then it would have opened the floodgates, as we've mentioned before on the channel.
And he also talked about how other councils would quickly move to get similar injunctions because there is clearly limited capacity for asylum seekers, accommodation around the country, and areas would want to be quick off the mark getting injunctions while there was still capacity elsewhere in the country for asylum seekers to be moved to. So that was the reasoning behind this. It will clearly, I think, provoke some anger here in Epping and indeed in other communities where people have been taking to the streets in recent weeks to campaign against asylum seekers being housed in hotels in their communities. Now, remember, the protests here was sparked when one of the asylum seekers housed here was charged with sexual assault of a local schoolgirl. That trial is ongoing. That anger is still there. In fact, just across the road, I can see some posters that have been left clearly from a recent protest. Stop violence against women and girls. There are England flags, Union Jack.
What's very interesting is about 40% of those who have been taking part in these protests, the riots that took place last year, and we're probably seeing more or less the same people attending these protests. 40% of those who took part in the riots last year, the Farage riots, had convictions or allegations against them for domestic violence. So they're not exactly the people that you would want to be standing shoulder to shoulder with when it comes to protecting women and girls.
Axe flying here. The anger is still here, and just before that ruling was announced by the Court of Appeal, a man drove past, clearly angry, shouted at the police outside this hotel, "We will never give up." There is real tension, real anger in this community about the situation here at the hotel, clearly sparked by the arrest and the charging of one of the asylum seekers for that offence. But I think those feelings run deep. Now, we've just in the last few minutes seen a drone go up above the hotel. We think probably a police drone. We've got quite a light police presence here at the moment and no protesters here, but there was actually a demo even last night before we got this ruling, because a Home Office lawyer argued in court yesterday that the competing interests, the human rights of the asylum seekers and the concerns of locals, were not equal, and that was taken by people here to mean that the human rights of the asylum seekers trumped their concerns, and therefore they took to the streets even before this decision by the Court of Appeal. So
this was one of the arguments put forward by the Home Office, and I think the wording of this was pretty terrible because it convinced the public that their concerns are not being taken on board. And of course, the likes of Farage and the Conservatives will jump on this and saying, look, the government is choosing asylum seekers over residents, when in reality it's the government are choosing the rule of law over people who are protesting. They have to respect international conventions. This is not going to sit well with the public, of course.
We will watch, we will wait to see what the reaction of local people here is. Now, there will be a full trial on this issue, this planning issue. It was actually a technicality of planning that led to the injunction. That's going to be in the middle of October, and that was another reason for the Court of Appeal saying, why get these asylum seekers out just 6 weeks before there'll be a full hearing on this matter. So there is still that, but for now the asylum seekers, 138 of them, can stay here in Epping, when local residents only last week jubilant that the High Court had said they would have to leave by the end of next week.
I imagine the Conservatives will just abandon this, at least in the short term, because there's nothing they can take from this. They had hoped that this appeal would fail, so that they could rely on a success here being rolled out in other councils around England in particular. So they were hoping that they would be successful, but they failed. But I think the protests will continue, but they'll be much more lower key. And that's the hope, that the likes of Farage and Talk TV, GB News don't amplify this. They will attempt to, but I think even the protesters realise we've lost this battle. Now, I don't know if they are convinced that they've lost the war, but they've at least lost this battle, and they will, as we've seen from this footage from Sky News, that there aren't that many people there protesting because they realise, well, what are we protesting against? We lost this case. It's likely to work against us. I don't think we're going to see the end of these protests. I think we're going to see more of them, but they're not going to have any real impact, because they're not going to convince the Home Office to do anything, because the Home Office has won this case. Reform keep pushing the hatred. Yes, they do. There was another comment I just wanted to read. My own sister has fallen for the anti-asylum seeker bullshit. It's very depressing. Sorry to hear that, Bill. Because Farage and the likes of Reform are offering cheap and easy solutions to complex problems. We just send them all back. Close the border. Stop the boats. Send the Navy into the sea to stop the boats. These are simple solutions to complex problems. We know that they're complex problems. The people on this stream understand that they're complex problems, and it takes diplomatic efforts. It requires you to look at the situation on the ground to understand, okay, what can we do, what can we not do in order to deal with this crisis. It is a crisis, but unfortunately it's been amplified by the far right, including Farage. Max is looking younger to look. Maybe it's the beard. I considered removing the beard. Maybe that's making me look a little bit younger. I need a wig as well, so that make me look even younger. What I worry about is it's going to get violent. I hope that's not the case. I think at least in the short term, we're going to see these people move away. They're going to realize, okay, there's nothing we can do in the short term. But if they're being amplified, if they're being riled up by the likes of Farage and Reform UK, then there's a possibility that we will see more violence in the future. But I think in the short term, a lot of these protesters will realize, okay, well, we're not going to change the situation at the moment. Maybe they will find alternative routes. Did you look into what's happening with Belarus and Russia being complicit with flooding Europe with migrants? I know what Belarus has and Russia have been doing. They've been attempting to redirect migrants into Eastern Europe to disrupt the situation. And that's really concerning because obviously Russia and Belarus have not Europe's interests at heart, and they want to create a situation where Europe is destabilized. And it's really concerning. And the immigrants in this situation are being used as pawns, which is really concerning as well. Farage offers a fast food solution to problems rather than encouraging people to cook from scratch. It's a brilliant analogy, yes. Well said, Freckapony, yes. Farage is offering, it up on a plate. Say, hey, you don't need to cook. You don't even need to think. I have prepared it for you. And unfortunately, so many people are buying into this. There was the video. Actually, let me see if I can find it. I'm going to try and find it here. Come on. There was a video from Sky News where they interview people. Oh, that's not it. Bear with me for a moment. Oh, damn it. Let me see. I had this wonderful video that I wanted to show you guys. I think it's from Sky News from yesterday. Yes, here we go.
Behind every hotel protest are people.
The smiles here is masking the anger.
Typically wary of media and distrustful of authority.
They would appeal, wouldn't they? They're scared.
We've been given candid access to speak to those involved.
So we've got to give you a chance.
Branded racist and far right.
They're calling you Nazi scum.
I couldn't care less what they call me.
Protests outside asylum seeker hotels are growing in intensity, drawing some who've never protested before. We're going to see Dinah Bentley, a retired teacher. She went to her first hotel protest last week in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, close to where she lives. A teacher.
Sorry, let me
she
just show
went
you
to her
the picture
first
of her home
hotel
once again.
protest last week in Wakefield,
A pretty nice home, okay? So that's to bear in mind as we go forward.
West Yorkshire, close to where she lives.
Hello, hi, Donna, thank you so much. For...
Are you all right with
yes,
dogs?
I'm fine with dogs.
Come
Hello.
on through.
How are you feeling? You're not too nervous, I hope.
No, all right. I know I should be. I should be very nervous.
Oh, God. I know some of you have probably already seen this, but this is a lady who has a full-size poster standee, whatever the hell you call these things, of Nigel frigging Farage in her home.
We are amongst friends.
Right.
I know it can be a little bit controversial. The fact.
Does anyone know if these are washable? For some people, it may be necessary to have them washable. Maybe they have a plastic, cover on them in case there's spillage or of some sort.
That I don't laud him, but I admire him.
Is that a permanent fixture
That is
or is that just for us?
That is permanent.
What is
It's certainly not a cult. Does anyone know any situation where you have a political figure? Like, I know there were some people in the past who had Boris Johnson ones. Like, what does this say about a person where they have a full-size poster thing of Nigel frigging Farage?
Is it about Nigel Farage that you like?
But I set all my hopes on him and reform because we're in such a mess.
It's only Trump. I know what his fan base is. Yeah, it's Trump has these things as well. But there are Trump supporters who have like cardboard cutouts of Trump. What they do with them, I don't want to know. And what this woman does with this cardboard cutout of Nigel Farage, I do not want to know. But we all have an idea of what she does with it.
What is it that he says that sort of resonates with you?
He says what I believe, what I think.
Look, he says what you want to hear. He doesn't say what you think. He says what you want to hear. So he says, "Oh, look, you're worried about immigrants. I'm worried about immigrants. You're worried about immigrants taking jobs or filling up hotels or destroying the country. I'm concerned about that as well. You should be concerned about this. I'm concerned about it." How's it pumping? Thank you so much for that super chat. Imagine going to a protest during school summer holidays. These poor kids have lost their full summer to this nonsense their parents are brought into. Yes. Instead of spending time with their kids, they're going to these protests. Well said. Unfortunately, that's the situation. They have been wound up by this guy here on the screen, by Nigel frigging Farage. He's benefiting from all of this when ordinary people are spending their summer standing outside for hours on end protesting against asylum seekers. Now, are there some bad eggs within the asylum system? Of course there are. And anyone who's committed a crime should be put behind bars and deported if necessary. But we're talking about a minority here.
Everybody talks about the migration, but our country's ruined. They've ruined it. It's an invasion, isn't it? And they shouldn't be here.
Dinah is 78, a grandmother of 2. She's never been to a migration-related protest.
Is that like to keep burglars away? Put it in the window, keeps children from disturbing the garden or something.
Before, understanding why this one and why now for her.
And of course, she's not a member of the public. She's not a normal human being. She's a Reform UK activist, obviously.
Is as much about the past as it is about the present.
Great Uncle Alfred, who was my grandma's brother. He was blown up in 1916. He died for our country, and if you could see what's happening to it now, and if he was in a grave, he would spin.
What would he be upset about? Would he be upset about fascists taking over? Would he be upset with people aligning themselves with the worst in society? Tapping into primal hate that people have, primal fears that people have? Is that what he'd be upset about?
I'm getting emotional now.
Why is it making you feel emotional?
Can't say. Sorry, I didn't expect that to happen.
Well, I'm sorry that we've made you cry, but it's obvious that this is something you feel very strongly about. I mean, in some way, do you feel like would you call this a fight?
A fight? It is a fight for survival. Not a physical fight, but it's a mental fight for survival.
Okay, you're fighting against what? Like, if you're saying you're fighting against what? Fighting against whom?
So, what do you mean by that?
Instead of government ministers paying lip service to the people of this country and saying some things that they think we would like to hear, actions speak louder than words.
You support Nigel Farage because he says exactly the things that you want to hear. You can't complain about government ministers just saying what you want to hear and not engaging in action. Nigel Farage is doing exactly that. What has Nigel Farage done that has improved your life?
And I think very little is being done, and what is being done is dire. We are
Okay, I've mentioned this in another video. It's keep calm and Brexit. So obviously this person has decided, I'm going to vote for Brexit because Nigel Farage has told me it's a good idea. And I'm now concerned about the future for my grandchildren. Okay, then why the heck did you vote for Brexit?
advised not to go to Somalia because it's a dangerous country. Yet we are accepting some men from Somalia into this country. They're undocumented. We know nothing about them. We don't know where they are, wandering the streets. It's not right, is it? Why are they not seeking asylum in the first safe country? Well, we know why, because when they get here, they're getting everything for free.
Okay, why the heck does the journalist not push back here? Honestly, like, just why doesn't the journalist say, actually, this is the reason why they're claiming these things, because they're not allowed to work? Would you support them working so that they wouldn't be a burden on the state? Unfortunately, we'll never know that answer because the journalist never frigging asked the question.
And we are paying for it.
You say the government aren't listening, but the government have said that they are planning, they hope to shut all the asylum hotels, stop illegal crossings.
It's all talk.
Send people back.
It's all talk. It's
all talk because Nigel Farage is somebody who delivers. I support Nigel Farage. I even have a frigging poster of him in my living room because I believe he will deliver. What has he actually delivered? How has he improved your life? Like, this woman is concerned about immigration when there are issues like cost of living, housing, the NHS, which should be her priority, but she's well off. It's okay. I'm okay, Jack. You know, this sort of attitude, because she's living out in the country. She has probably paid for her own home. She doesn't have to worry about the cost of living crisis. She's a pensioner. She has probably a decent pension. I don't know her situation, but she looks reasonably well off. So all that's left to be concerned about is foreigners.
Must have said exactly the same thing and done nothing.
At what point would you believe that they are listening to you?
If I can't even bear to watch migrant dinghies landing. I can't bear to watch them.
Then turn off the frigging TV.
I'd be happy if the Navy went into the Channel. We're an island, for God's sake. And stopped the boats. That would make me over the moon.
You'd be over the moon. So she would be happy if the Royal Navy went into the English Channel and did what to the dinghies? I'm not going to repeat ad nauseum the problems with this, but she would be over the she would be delighted. She'd be delighted for her kids to be able to access, I don't know, housing. She wouldn't be delighted for the NHS to be rebuilt after the Tories. She would be delighted. This is what these people think. This is how poisoned these people's minds have become. For them, joy is seeing somebody else suffer. Not for the country to be rebuilt, not for the NHS to be restructured, to be improved, not for young people to be able to access housing, not for poverty to end. No, her priority is, let's see asylum seekers in the sea punished in some way. Sorry to be going on about this, but it's necessary. Because these are the people who vote. Young people, I'm sorry, but this is a call out to young people. You need to frigging vote. Because if you don't vote, she is going to vote. And she's going to vote for policies against your interests. How's it popping again? Thanks so much for that. These people are affected by hyperreal simulacria. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The reality is constructed by whatever they absorb on social media. They are self-referential. I think from what I understand, I think you're completely correct. They're absorbing everything from social media. So social media is telling them that the country is falling apart. Nigel Farage is the only practical solution to this. Immigration is the primary concern, because if you look at it, she's sitting in her living room. Seems to be a reasonable sized house. She's not suffering from a cost of living crisis as far as we can see. So the only concern she has is, what can I be concerned about? Immigration. And Nigel Farage and social media has constantly told me that's the primary concern of the British people. When in reality, the primary concern is the cost of living, housing, the NHS, and other issues like that, but not immigration. Immigration is not a priority.
Dinah tells us she thinks people were frightened to say what they really think about migration. No more, she says.
We're on our way to see a man called James. Now, he used to be in the army, he used to be a police officer. He doesn't do that anymore, he's now a truck driver. But over the past few months, he's also become, by his own admission, fairly notorious in his local area because of what he's trying to do with a volunteer-led community group.
We meet James.
This is really concerning because the Conservatives have imposed austerity, and this has resulted in cuts to public services. There is a lack of policing in the communities, and there's a lack of communication between the police and the communities. So what you're ending up having is vigilantes basically filling the gap, and this is really concerning. We have a super chapter also from Gareth. Thank you so much, Gareth. Having spent 3 months on a psych ward, been home 2 weeks, my first family therapy session consisted of my folks effing about illegal immigrants and a Nigerian therapist agreeing with them. F me. My goodness. I'm sorry to hear that, Gareth. Thanks for that support. So many people are being sucked into this. You know, people who we would normally assume are somewhat immune to this sort of rhetoric are now being pulled into this because of the likes of social media, because of the likes of the mainstream media. Like, there was a time when this sort of rhetoric, this sort of coverage was covered by the extremes, the GB Newses, the Talk TVs of this world. And now it's been fed to the public through ITV, Sky News, the BBC as well. You know, this used to be the fringe. Now it's the mainstream, unfortunately. And of course, so many people are unable to avoid it.
At home, he was initially sceptical to speak to a journalist from the so-called mainstream media.
It's not impartial. It's not impartial. And the big thing is, a lot of the guys and women that go to these protests, we're working class, and it's our streets, it's our community that gets trounced. It's our housing that's taken. If you're liberal...
Oh my goodness. I'm not trying to dismiss this guy's opinion or his concerns, but the problem is he's ignoring the reality that has come before. The reality of the situation is that the Conservatives, and in general, in particular the Conservatives, have run down public services, have not built enough social and affordable housing, have not built up the NHS, and have not built up public services. They have imposed austerity, and this is the consequence of that. And people are angry. And instead of directing their anger at the Conservative Party, who's now jumping on a bandwagon, they're directing their anger at asylum seekers, because they see asylum seekers coming in, and they see asylum seekers being put in housing. They see asylum seekers being given things like free phones and accommodation and food and NHS support and stuff like this. And they're being constantly fed this on social media as well, how they're being left behind. And this narrative is extremely powerful. And we have to counter this narrative. And it's extremely difficult to counter this narrative because you have the mainstream media jumping on board this bandwagon as well, pumping this narrative out. You know, how often have you heard Sky News even, who's supposed to be the mainstream, Sky News talking about illegal migrants, when instead we're talking about asylum seekers? There's no mention of these people working. If asylum seekers were allowed to work, then they wouldn't need to rely on this support. They wouldn't need to be put in hotels or in to be given free phones or free stuff. If this was the plan by government to allow asylum seekers to work, it would strip away a lot of this rhetoric that, of course, is being pushed by the far right and being absorbed by working class people.
Upper middle class, it doesn't affect you. Your type of immigrant is different to our type of immigrant.
What do you mean by that?
Your type of immigrant is educated. It's a well-to-do immigrant. It's either a surgeon or a banker or an engineer. Our immigrant is the low end of the low. That's what we find. We get the dross, we get the criminals that the other countries don't want.
It's this belief that's led James to found what he's called a local community watch group. He says it'll tackle all antisocial behaviour, but with a focus on what he calls illegal migrant men with conflicting cultures. In just a few weeks, the group's drawn hundreds of followers online, but others say the group, and James himself, isn't just divisive, but dangerous.
It's potentially dangerous. I don't know this guy, so I'm not going to judge him because I don't know enough information about him. But the problem here is that if there is a gap, ordinary people will fill it. And why does this gap exist? Because the Conservatives imposed austerity. They did not hire enough police officers and they did not invest enough in resources for the police to work with the community. If the police had the resources necessary to work with the communities, we wouldn't have these problems. These problems would not exist. This is a consequence of Tory actions or misinvestments, lack of investment. Ordinary people are taking it into their own hands. And unfortunately, when ordinary people take it into their own hands, they're not going to do the right thing. They may think they're doing the right thing, but they're going to get involved in situations where they're going to misjudge people, they're going to attack people, and this is going to create chaos.
Is to provide a gentle presence within the community, not to be intrusive. But if we see any crime, whether that's illegal migrant crime or whether it's our local residents committing crime, we will intervene. We're not there to be judge, jury and executioner. We'll just detain people, assess the situation and phone the police if needed.
You said this isn't a vigilante group, but you've just described it as a group that will intervene, assess a situation, possibly detain someone based on that assessment. Yes. Is that not what vigilantism is?
No, that's what normal English blokes used to do in times of...
He's literally describing a vigilante group and saying it's not a vigilante group. That's exactly what it is.
Bold.
But once again, if people don't feel that their community is being protected, then of course they're going to rely on people like this.
So it's only a modern version of that.
The Tories, I keep saying, the Tories should be nowhere near the levers of power. The Tory party should disappear because they are responsible for most of this. Not all of it, for most of this. And they continually talk about, well, let's focus on Labour at the moment. Let's focus on the current party. Let's focus on criticising the status quo. They will not take responsibility for this. They have, I don't want to say blood on their hands, but they have to take responsibility for this, what's happening here. You have communities that have been underfunded, lack of policing, all of these problems, austerity, all of these problems being forced upon the poorest people in society. And of course they're going to look to Nigel Farage. Of course they're going to look to vigilantes to solve their problems. Ivan, thank you so much for that super chat. Chris Phillip misled what Labour said in the court proceedings. The Tories' audacity in pointing... Sorry, I'm losing the screen. Losing the point. The Tories' audacity in pointing the finger at the situation is an insult to the public's intelligence. We know that the Tories started this in the first place. Yes, the Tories were responsible for putting people in hotels in the first place. Why did they move people into hotels? Because the detention centres were overcrowded. Why were the detention centres overcrowded? Because the Tories decided we're not going to process people's claims. So they moved people into hotels. Then they realised, actually, the hotels are a bit of a problem. So let's put some people in rented accommodation. Let's put some people in ex-army bases. And then what happened? They moved people into army bases, and Tories and Reform people from Reform or supporters of Farage protested outside these army bases and said, we don't want people in these army bases, so they had to be closed down. Obviously, the army bases had been derelict for like 20 years in some cases, so they were not fit for purpose. And it'd be more expensive to fix them up than just to put people in hotels. So the Tories realised, hey, what we'll do is we'll put asylum seekers in hotels. We'll, give a few contracts to our friends and donors along the way. And then now they're on the outside complaining about asylum seekers in hotels. Now, we have to be very clear. The Labour Party are being a little bit dishonest when it comes to the numbers in hotels or the number of hotels in use. The numbers did come down before the general election last year to about 200. So they went from 400 down to 200, more or less. The Labour Party are trying to claim victory there. At the moment, there are about 210, I think, hotels in use. So there's a political game going on between the Labour government today and the Conservatives of today as well. The Conservatives are saying, we brought down the numbers. It would have been zero if we had stayed in power. But obviously you were not in power because you called a general election. There's no obligation on Rishi Sunak to call a general election. He could have actually called one this year if he wanted, but he decided, no, we're going to go with a general election in 2024. And the Tories were removed. And the hotels numbers are... The numbers of people, so the number of hotels have come down, but the number of people in hotels has gone up. Now, why is the number of so-called illegal migrants going up? Well, wait to hear this. It's because of the Tory policy of making it more difficult for people to get into the country legally, which is forcing people to come in illegally. I'm using quotes because these are not the correct terms, but these are the terms that most people understand. So the Conservatives made it more difficult for people to come in with visas because they had to bring down the net migration numbers. But what did this do? It forced more people who wanted to come in to work as an economic migrant through the small boat process, through that route. So the small boat numbers increase, not because the government are doing something wrong in a sense, but because the number of people coming in legally has been suppressed. So they're not allowed to come in legally, so they're finding another way. So if you look at, and I recommend people look at this themselves, don't take my word for it, but if you look at the number of people who've applied for visas for education, studying at universities, work visas, care visas, all of this, it has declined. This was the Tory plan, and the Labour Party has not rolled back on this. They have embraced this. So net migration is coming down. I think it's down by about 400,000. But small boat crossings are up because people are finding it, well, the only way I can get into the UK is through the small boat crossings. So instead of actually creating safe routes for people to come in, which would eliminate the small boat crossings, the government is talking about smashing the gangs. Why? Because they have to act tough. Why do they have to act tough? Because they're afraid of Nigel frigging Farage. We have a super chat. Thanks, Ivan, for that super chat before. We have one from Gareth. Once again, I met an asylum seeker in there. Vietnamese guy was an arsehole. Stole from me, punched a woman, attacked my folks. That's one guy. FFS, one guy. Yeah, look, once again, I've never said that all asylum seekers are wonderful individuals who are seeking asylum from persecution, who should be provided. This is the thing that you hear from the far right and the right wing in general. Why don't you put them up in your home? Okay, but as I think it was Ben Kentish said, I'm concerned about homelessness. Does that mean that I have to put people who are homeless in my home? No, there are fundamental problems with putting... It's a ridiculous position to take, okay? But even if you were to take this position, I don't have the facilities to provide asylum seekers with the support they need. And I'm not talking just about a home. I'm not just talking about a bed. I'm talking about mental health support, trauma that many people have gone through. But of course, as Gareth has said, not everyone is a good person. There are bad people as well. And they have to be processed, and if they have no right to stay, they should be deported. Most reasonable people support that position. The far right and the likes of GB News and others constantly say, if you don't agree with us, you support open borders and you just want everyone to come in and stay, and you're against deportations, complete and utter deportations. I've never met anyone. Honestly, I've just had discussions with lots of people. I've never yet met anyone who says we should have open borders and we should allow everyone in, irrespective of their position. I've never met anyone like that. I don't think these people actually exist. Like some people may say, maybe Jeremy Corbyn is like that. I've never actually heard him say that. Maybe somebody should ask him that question. But I've yet to hear anyone say, I support the idea of just letting everyone in, irrespective of whether they have a legitimate claim or not. It's a straw man argument, a straw man fallacy if you want to look it up. Hedgehog Legs, thank you so much for that support. I just see number 2. I'm not sure what that's about. And we have Urban Legend says they do have blood on their hands, Max, especially 335,000 excess deaths caused by austerity policy. Yes. And that's a separate issue, but you're completely correct there. The Tories imposed austerity, cut public services, cut the support for the most vulnerable in society. That's another reason, as I've said before, they should be nowhere near the levers of power. They as a party should cease to exist. The only reason they should exist, if you want to create a reason for them, is to stop Reform from getting into power. But even that is a massive stretch, because the Conservative Party have merged into Reform, and Reform have taken over, have become the dustbin of the Conservative Party. Look at all the defections we saw recently, where they're Tories who failed, the people who are at the extreme within the Conservative Party have defected to Reform because they don't have a home left in the Conservative Party. But the Conservative Party today has no right to exist. Look at what they have done. They have built the foundations for Reform, and now they're pandering to Reform as much as possible. Let me read some more of your comments, guys, because you guys make the stream, and I want to involve you guys as much as possible because it's important. Labour should talk about Farage playing into the issue. In 2018, pre-Brexit, there were only 299 individuals crossing the channel. That number skyrocketed to 45,000 in 2022. And he advocated for Brexit. Yes, because a lot of the people coming in before Brexit were coming in via lorries. That was closed off, but also because it's not possible for the UK to return people because it's no longer a member of the European Union. It was possible to return people through the Dublin Convention, and that no longer is applicable for the UK. Or for GB at least. What about Ukrainians? Ukrainians are able to come in via a safe route. Why not create a safe route for others as well? You keep hearing about how the Conservatives and people on the right are concerned about people dying in the sea. Well, one way to stop people from dying in the sea is to create a safe route. Tarring all the same brush, the Israelis are doing the same with the Palestinians. Yes, 100% agreement there. Everyone is Hamas, even little children who were born like yesterday. The protest bill will be passed on to the council taxpayers. Yes, as well as the council court cost for suing the government. Yes, this is what was really interesting about the interview of the Tory councillor a few days ago, where she was asked about, okay, how much is this going to cost? And she couldn't answer the question. Once again, the Conservatives are very happy to spend other people's money. I find it so ironic when they bring up the meme of Margaret Thatcher, who was saying, socialists like running out of... Was it socialists like running out of other people's money or like spending other people's money? No, the Conservatives like spending other people's money. They spent £750 million or £700 million on Rwanda and sent 4 people there voluntarily. I think more Home Secretaries went to Rwanda than asylum seekers, which is quite interesting. Ivan, again, thank you so much, Ivan, for your support, and thanks for that comment tonight. Farage has yet again said the UK should leave the European Convention on Human Rights and replace it with a British Bill of Rights for only British citizens. Okay, it doesn't work like that. In reality, though, I don't think reform would want to secure the rights of British citizens either. So I mentioned on social media how Farage, thanks so much for that, Ivan. I mentioned on social media how Farage voted against stronger protections for workers in a recent vote in the House of Commons. Now Farage is saying, I will protect your rights. You don't need to be part of the European Convention on Human Rights. You don't need a foreign court, an international court, a foreign court protecting your rights. Now, this is, I want to give people a little bit of advice when you're interacting with people on the right, or family members or whoever, who are banging on about we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. It's not about your rights, it's about protections for your rights. Rights have no value unless there's protection in place. And what it means is that if you have an issue with the government and your rights are not being respected, if you go to the Supreme Court, if you go to the government and they don't respect your rights, there is a higher court, an external, an international court that you can go to have your rights reinforced or protected. That's what it's about. It's not about, because this is the argument you're going to hear from people on the right or people who are against the idea of maintaining the UK in this convention. They say, well, we had rights before this. We had rights, look at the United States, look at Australia, look at Canada, look at New Zealand. They're not part of the European Convention on Human Rights and they have rights. The point is not rights. The point is protection for those rights. Because Nigel Farage and Robert Jenrick, for example, if he becomes the next Prime Minister, they could say, well, we will protect your rights. We will give you whatever rights you want under a Bill of Rights. But those rights are worth nothing if they're not protected. And if Parliament, under Nigel Farage or Robert Jenrick, decide we're not actually going to enforce those rights, we're not going to protect those rights, then those rights are worth nothing. Look at what's happening in the United States. You're supposed to have the First Amendment, the right to free speech. Well, Donald Trump is running roughshod over that. You're supposed to have the right to due process. People have been deported to El Salvador without due process. So the right itself is completely useless unless it's protected by something external. And we have seen in the past how people have taken the British government or other organizations to the European Convention on to the European Court of Human Rights and won cases. There is a guy, I recommend Professor Tim. He has a YouTube channel. We've done not debates, but we've had discussions before on the Sunday Roast and others. Really, really good YouTube channel. Really do check it out. I can't recommend it enough. But Professor Tim and his partner took the Greek government to the European Court of Human Rights a number of years ago and won. Now, this is why it's so important. Because if it had stopped at the Greek Supreme Court, they would likely have lost and would have had to suffer the consequences. I'm not going to get into the details. You can check it out on Professor Tim's channel. But if the European Court of Human Rights had not existed, it would have been a different outcome for them. This is why it's so important. So when you're just debating this with people, don't debate the rights, debate the protection to those rights. Brexit was all about stripping away protections, not so much the rights of people, but the protections to people's rights when it came to workers, came to the environment, came to consumers. Rights didn't happen overnight, dear me. No, they didn't. The rights had to be fought for, but also the protection of those rights in a sense is more important than the rights themselves. Most of the Reform voters do not know what the ECHR is. No, and they're being convinced by Farage and others, we need to leave the convention in order to kick out the migrants. They're being told, you need to vote to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Did the Rwanda program even start? It did start. In a sense, start is a difficult question to answer. Did it start or did it not start? It did start, but unfortunately, there are a number of problems with the Rwanda scheme. The first problem is it was unlawful. See, the Supreme Court said you can't send people to a country that's not safe. Now, the Tories said it is safe. We legislated that it's safe. But the problem with that is that they were allowing people to come from Rwanda to claim asylum. But if you're granting asylum to somebody from Rwanda, then automatically you're admitting that it's not a safe country. Like, you don't generally grant asylum to people from Ireland or from the United States, not now, not yet, maybe in the future, from Japan, from Australia, from France, from Germany, from Italy. So these, you don't see many people claiming asylum. Maybe there are some strange people, but generally you don't see people claiming asylum from these countries. Why? Because these countries are deemed safe. Rwanda is not deemed a safe country. That's why the Supreme Court said you can't send people there. And the UK government, at the time, the Tories, decided we're going to legislate. This is beyond insane. We're going to legislate for it to be safe. Why didn't they legislate for the NHS the NHS waiting list to be zero? It's exactly the same logic. They could have legislated that the small boat crossings had stopped. Okay? We just legislate that they have stopped. Because it's exactly the same logic. We're legislating something that's into reality that is not part of reality. So the whole idea of a Bill of Rights doesn't make a lot of sense, because the Bill of Rights would, apart from the idea that it can't be enforced, you would have to rely on Nigel Farage to protect your rights. That no one is that insane. Even Brexiteers, even Reform UK supporters, if you were to ask them enough questions, they wouldn't support the idea that Nigel Farage is going to protect their rights. Maybe some of them would, but you need an external court to protect those rights. And the second is, what happens to the Good Friday Agreement? Nigel Farage has said we can negotiate a new Good Friday Agreement. Well, that would require the Irish government, it would require the United States, it would require the parties involved in Northern Ireland getting involved, saying, yeah, okay, we'll sign up to this. But in order to have a negotiation, you need to offer something better. Well, what's better than the Good Friday Agreement? Well, we need to negotiate a new agreement because we need to deport a few migrants. Well, people in Northern Ireland are going to go, well, why would we rip up the Good Friday Agreement for that? So that Nigel Farage can deport a few people. Like, what you're offering would have to be better than the Good Friday Agreement. And I don't know of anything better than the Good Friday Agreement at the moment. I've said before, the only way around this would be a United Ireland and a border poll allowing the people on the island of Ireland to vote for a United Ireland. And Farage would be fully supportive of that because he doesn't give a crap about Northern Ireland. The unionists in Northern Ireland would be in a worse position with a Farage government than they are currently. And some of them don't seem to understand that. And I'm not saying that because I'm against the DUP or I'm critical of the DUP. This is me being extremely honest. Nigel Farage would be happy to see Northern Ireland become part of a United Ireland if it got rid of the problem of the European Convention on Human Rights. This is what he would want to see. And honestly, anyone within the unionist community hitching their wagon to Farage and Reform is beyond insane. I've said before, they hate Ireland, they hate the EU, they hate migrants more than they love the union. Thanks, Ivan, for that. Farage has yet to say, about the Bill of Rights. Okay. We have another one from Ivan again. Thanks so much, Ivan. Farage wouldn't stop with leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. He also wants the UK out of the UN conventions and treaties. Yes, it's all about leaving stuff. It's not about fixing problems. See, Farage and others have said, look, we need to leave stuff in order to fix a problem. But leaving stuff will not fix the problem. As we saw with Brexit. Farage and others were saying, well, if we leave the European Union, we'll be able to fix the NHS, we'll be able to fix housing, we'll be able to fix poverty, the economy, all of these things. Did it work? No. Now, Farage's response, of course, to this is, well, it's not my fault, it's not Brexit's fault, it's because the Tories didn't implement Brexit correctly. But the problem with that is we know leaving the European Union and the single market creates problems irrespective of how you look at them. Like, leaving the single market objectively creates barriers to trade. You can talk about, well, we can do trade with other parts of the world. No, but if most of the trade is with the European Union, creating a barrier to trade makes trade more difficult, makes it more expensive. That's an objective reality. And this is not me spinning something. This is not me talking politically. This is the reality of the situation. If you create a barrier to trade with your nearest partner, it's going to make trade more difficult. Now, Farage and others said, well, they will not put up barriers to trade because they need us so much. But that's demonstrating a complete lack of understanding of how trade works. They believe that, well, the European Union would not put up these barriers to trade because they need us so important. We're so important to them. But the European Union is like a ministry. I've said this before. It's not like a person. It's not like even like a country. It's like a ministry. And the ministry follows rules. And the rule is if you're outside the European Union, if you're outside the single market, you're treated differently. Doesn't matter who you are. You're treated differently. Now, we can try and improve the situation between you and us, but you're automatically going to be treated different. And think about it from a rational point of view. Why would somebody be a member? Think about it if you were a member of a gym. If anyone's a member of a gym, I'm not really, as you can see, I'm not a member of a gym. But if you're a member of a gym, can you imagine if there was somebody who was not a member of the gym, but were able to access all the services within the gym in the same way as somebody who's a member? What do you think the members of the gym would say about that? As soon as they find out, they'd say, why the heck does this person on the outside have access to the same services as us without paying a fee, being a member, following the rules? That would end pretty quickly, okay? Because they would leave. They would, or they would punish the management. They would demand that the management do something about this. They would lobby against the management. So it's nonsensical, the Brexiteer position, that we could be outside the European Union and the single market, but have the same privileges of being a member. I'm not going to rehash all of that once again. Thanks, Ivan. Yes, look, when it comes to Farage and the European Convention, he wants to leave stuff, but it's going to be extremely difficult. This is the silver lining here. It would require a massive amount of negotiations, and you wouldn't be able to do this in one parliament. So Farage will promise big, but I don't think he can deliver. I think what Farage will do is like the Tories. He will blame others. So he will try and do things and say, we wanted to deport all these people, but we can't because of the blob. Or we wanted to deport all these people, but the problem is the activist journalists, judges. This is the problem. So it will always be somebody else's fault. Or he will be in control of the media and say, well, we don't need to. Everything is wonderful. Like Trump. We're succeeding. We're winning. Every day we're winning. So I think it depends on how the media reacts to Farage, how much control he has over the media, and what the narrative most people, because he could distract people with other narratives. Woke, we're fighting woke. We've defeated the issue of immigration. Now we're fighting woke. He will distract the public. He's very good at doing that. We have a super chat from, thanks so much, Ivan, for you've sent out some memberships to Christy, to Sarah, to Matt, I think it's Mattil, Peter, Howard, and Viper. Peter and Howard. Thank you so much for that. Garrett says the whole point of the ECHR is to protect people's rights with their respective nations. When their prospective nations can't or won't. Why can't these morons understand this? Because they've been convinced that we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights to deport people. And unfortunately, it's not just the Tories now who are jumping on board this bandwagon. It's even Labour. We had Blunkett, former Home Secretary, what what the heck, Lord Blunkett, I forget his first name, Lord Blunkett. And we also had Jack Straw was talking about tweaks to the European Convention on Human Rights. And this sounds exactly like what we heard when it came to Brexit. We don't need to leave the European Union. We just need to tweak the European Union in order to benefit Britain. That was the Remainer argument, unfortunately. And of course it failed because Farage and others were offering a full fat, let's leave, everything will be better. We don't need to tweak, we just need to leave. And unfortunately, the music is sounding very much like that today. Would they have to scrap the Union flag then? Maybe. See, there's a few interesting things here. So it would be interesting to see the reaction from Wales and Scotland when it came to leaving the European Union, or leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. Could they block it? Could the Scottish Government, the Welsh Assembly, block a Farage government from leaving the European Convention on Human Rights? I don't know. They could take it up with the Supreme Court. Would the Supreme Court rule in favour of the Welsh or Scottish governments? What about Northern Ireland? If Sinn Féin is in charge, would they be able to block this as well? So there are a lot of unknowns here, because this has never been done before. You know, Farage, if he becomes Prime Minister, wants to turn Britain into a sort of Belarus. In that case, I wonder if Farage would accept any unionists fleeing as asylum seekers from a united Ireland. If only pigs would sprout wings. Well said, Freckle Bunny. Maybe you see, Sammy Wilson and Jim Allister fleeing Northern Ireland, the north of Ireland, the 6 counties, to become asylum seekers in Britain. They would be welcomed, a bit like the South Africans that Donald Trump welcomed to the United States, something like that. So yeah, you could see something like that happen for sure. Kirsty, thank you so much for that super chat. I think Kemi will find a way to sort out. My goodness. She should just give up, shouldn't she? Christy, what do you think? She should just give up at this stage. Take her ball and go home. It's pathetic. It's beyond pathetic. She's trying to fight with Farage. And of course, fighting Farage on his territory. Fighting him on his issues. Immigration. The Conservatives are freaking insane. Why are they talking about immigration when Farage has this sewn up? He's in control of that narrative. Talk about frigging something else. Although when it comes to the Conservatives and Kemi Badenoch, what else can she talk about? There's not much there, for her left. Thanks, Kirsty. Gareth again. Thank you so much, Gareth. Very kind of you for that massive super chat. Thank you so much for that. The genial measure of any dedication by safeguarding the fundamental rights of the freedom of all human beings arises when we are confronted with the question of whether those we hold in contempt are deserving of such rights. The rights are supposed to be for everyone. We're not supposed to pick and choose. Well said about that statement there. They're supposed to be for everyone. And if you start deciding, well, these people deserve rights and these don't, then it's completely over. And this is what they're trying to sell. This is like, well, if we leave the European Convention on Human Rights, we'll just take rights away from immigrants. We're not going to take rights away from British people. We wouldn't do something like that. But that's what they want to achieve at the end of the day. That's what Brexit was about as well. Stripping away protections for British people, consumers, workers, the environment, all of these things. And even Kemi Badenoch was trying to push it through recently, which we need to dump, 5,000 laws, EU laws. That's what it was all about. Thanks so much, Ivan, once again. Max, as you know, I'm not on the same page as you on the EU. I think its institutions need fundamental change, including making it more intergovernmental. However, we are on the same page as the ECHR, though. And I've never... thanks for that. And I want to reinforce the point that while I'm supportive of the European Union, I'm an advocate for it as well. It needs reform. There is massive reform need, and I mean reform with a small r, but there's massive reform needed within the EU. It was created many years ago, and I think it needs to change It's falling behind the United States when it comes to GDP. There are some fundamentally positive things about the EU. There's some fundamentally negative things. I think it needs reform. For example, when it comes to lobbying, it's slow to change. There is legislation. There is, for example, regulations that need to be reformed as well. It needs to be more dynamic, maybe in this modern world with technology and AI and stuff like that. So I'm not an advocate of sticking with it as it is. I think it needs reform, but the way to reform something is from within, not from without. And what Reform UK and Farage and others are suggesting, we need to leave because it can't be reformed. No. But we have to be very cautious when it comes to the ECHR, and I think, Ivan, you agree with me on this. When it comes to reforming, if you're going to reform the ECHR, it has to be through consensus. It has to be a combined effort. It has to be focusing on fundamental rights. Times change. I'm not saying that the ECHR is a monolith, that it's set in stone. It has to adapt to the new realities. But the people who are pushing reform of the ECHR are not, their interests are not humanitarian. Their interests are not based on human rights. They're about, let's kick out people we don't like. And they are the wrong people to be pushing this narrative. The AFD love how the EU helps them with their causes, money. Well, also, yeah, if the EU is not seen as on the side of ordinary people, political parties, all political parties around Europe try to blame the EU for its problems. The Italian government are doing it, the French, the Germans, whoever. It's not just a British thing when the UK was a member of the European Union. All countries, when they get into a bit of a tight spot, they say, the problem is the EU. It's not our fault, it's the EU. It's been a scapegoat for a long time. And it will continue to be a scapegoat, unfortunately. Who mentioned Sammy's arse? Please don't mention Sammy's arse. It's meant to be a family show. Okay. Look what happened to Greece, left-wing government, for example. Greece's left-wing government. It's a complicated issue. But also rights come in with two. Sorry, but also rights come in with it too. What do you think needs changing? That's directed at Ivan. Wow, we're way over. I've been blabbing for too long, and I've missed so many things that I was supposed to talk about. Boo is me, not boo earns, but boo me. Let's end on a sort of positive note, and then we'll finish with our one for the road. But I wanted to show you this because this was quite interesting. Let me bring up the screen here. Whoops. Here we go. No, close that. Here we go. Reform UK Council removes St. George and Union flags over safety concerns. So Reform have been constantly banging on about how we need to maintain the flag. The flag of St. George, the Union flag, it should be flown everywhere and anywhere because it's important to demonstrate people's love for the Union or love for their nation. Patriotic fever all over the place. So Durham Council, which is actually, I think, run by Crafty, I won't say his surname, Crafty something. Durham Council says strong rope on bunting was found to be at risk, amid controversy over flag flying across England. So a Reform-led council has started to remove flags and bunting displaying the St. George Cross and the Union flag after concerns were raised that they would cause accidents. Oh my God, you couldn't make this up. Durham County Council issued a statement on X on Friday saying that that while the council understands and respects the community's desire to express national pride, celebration and remembrance, it is important to ensure that each expression does not compromise public safety. So the whole point of these, the point of not flying flags in the first place on lampposts and stuff like this was that it was a risk to public safety. And now even Reform UK, their councils are realizing, actually, we better take this stuff down because it's a risk to public safety. what a joke of a party they are. Really, anyone who still votes for them needs their head examined, because Reform UK are willing to jump on any bandwagon available. Kemi Badenoch likes to jump on bandwagons, but I think Reform UK are front and centre when it comes to bandwagons. And when they do this, they obviously put themselves in positions which are illogical or illegal or unlawful or insane. And of course the idea, well, we need to support people putting up flags and stuff. Then they realize, actually, this is a risk to public health. And if people get, if people get hurt or if there's a problem, it's potentially a case that could be brought against the council, because the council are responsible for maintaining, the highway, stuff like that. And if cases are brought against the council, then the council will have to pay. And, council funds are quite strict, quite tight at the moment. And of course, even Reform UK would like to be able to implement something that they can sell to the public at the next election. Say, we did this, we filled this many potholes. If they end up having to pay out money to people who have accidents because of flags, then it's not a very good look for them. Crafty Wang, strong rope. I said strong rope, damn it. Thanks so much, Gareth. Yes, that's the guy who had a particular Darren Grimes. If you Google Darren Grimes crafty, then you find out a bit of information about Darren Grimes. Allegedly, his nickname during I think it was high school, secondary school. I'm not sure which school he went to, but he had a particular name for what he'd do during class that was against the rules. Let's just put it that way. The Union flag combined with the Irish, Scottish and Palestinian flags. Look, I've said before, Palestinian flags, Irish flags, Union flags, English flag, Scottish flag, whatever. You're not supposed to put them on lampposts and stuff like that, because there are a risk to public safety. You must always have the permission of the council. You must have permission of whoever's in charge of the highway to do this. If it's your private property, you can put up whatever flag you want, I think, within reason, unless it's, unless it's something illegal. But generally, there are rules that you have to follow. The problem here is when it comes to many of the flags that are being put up in places where they don't have they have not permission, and they are a risk to public safety. Because, some of these flags, if they fall down during a storm or whatever and go on people's windscreens, somebody could have an accident. Or if they fall on the street and somebody slips on them because they're made of synthetic materials, somebody could have an accident. Or just, it creates problems because if they're torn and they fall on the road, they have to be cleaned up. And who's responsible for cleaning them up? The council. And that's a cost, especially as councils don't have very much money. So we're going to end here, guys. I think when it comes to the ruling, we're probably going to see a few more protests. They'll be much more lower key because the Conservatives and Reform realise, look, we've lost this battle. Maybe not the war, but they've lost this battle. There may be some concentrated protests in different ways going forward. I think the protesters are probably going to find another way to protest. Maybe not in front of the hotels, but maybe outside Parliament or something like that. And of course, Kemi Badenoch, the Conservatives, Chris Philp and others will attempt to take advantage of that situation. So guys, I want to say thanks so much to everyone who came on tonight. On Tuesday, I may have a special guest. We're trying to organize it. So somebody who you know very well, hopefully. So she should be on Tuesday. So look out for that. And before we finish, we have our one for the road. So hope you will enjoy this before we go. And have a wonderful weekend. So enjoy this video.
You detain and deport women and girls back to women and girl-hating Afghanistan.
Okay, Victoria, well, I prefer to call it Afghanistan. I just think that's more respectful. Look, if a woman comes here illegally, we will detain and deport her. If she comes with smaller women, girls, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Sometimes you have to do deals with people you don't like. In this country, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Yet. And I think this is where reform comes in and what reform can bring to the British people, because we will negotiate with terrorists. We will do that for the British public. You know, sometimes you have to spend time with people you don't like, you know, with your in-laws at Christmas. Would we negotiate with Idi Amin? Yes. Would we negotiate with Stalin? Yes, if it meant that lots of Gulagians were coming over here on small boats illegally. Yes, we would. You know, would we negotiate with Hitler? No, because of Churchill.
Somebody could have arrived here illegally, even though they are genuinely being oppressed by the Taliban in Afghanistan, and you would send them back there, what, for public lashings?
Well, negotiating with terrorists has to be done. It's not nice, it's not pretty, and it can result in women getting lashed. But do you know what I say? It's better that they get lashed than they come over here and get on the lash at taxpayers' expense, thereby causing a riot from concerned mothers in Epping.
Oh, Rosie. So, guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Tuesday. Same bad time, same bad channel. Stay safe, take care, and good night.